أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لقد نصركم الله في مواطن كثيرة ويوم حنين إذ أعجبتكم كثرتكم فلم تغن عنكم شيئا وضاقت عليكم الأرض بما رحبت ثم وليتم مدبرين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Over these nights, we have been speaking about the various battles that took place, the Maghazi, during the life of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa And we've predominantly been focusing on the period of the life of the Holy Prophet from the second year after Hijrah, which was the date of the Battle of Badr, up until when we talked about the Battle of Khandaq, which was in the 5th year after Hijrah. We've looked at the Battle of Badr, the Battle of Uhud, the Battle of Khandaq, the various battles with the Jewish tribes of Medina, the Banu Qaynuqa', Banu Nadir, and the Banu Qurayza, which spanned across this time period as well. And then we also spoke about the Battle of Khaybar. Now the Battle of Khaybar, it took place in the 7th year after Hijrah. And 1 year after that, the Holy Prophet, he conquered Makkah. This was the 8th year after Hijrah, in the month of Ramadan. And the final major battle that he fought in, there was no fighting at the Battle of Tabuk. The last major battle of the Holy Prophet himself was that of the Battle of Hunayn. And that was in Shawwal of the 8th year after Hijrah. It's only a few weeks after the conquest of Makkah. And so the same army that the Holy Prophet has that has marched on Makkah, even though it's largely a bloodless conquering of the city, because they overwhelmed the opposition and used clever tactics from the Holy Prophet, and we'll speak more about this in detail inshallah in 2 nights' time in the Soy Majlis. But it also involved some of the people from Makkah as well. Now, after they conquered Makkah, it caused a lot of trepidation amongst many of the Arab tribes which were near Makkah. And although some of these tribes, like the Banu Thaqif of Ta'if, had some enmity with the people of Quraysh, they were relatively happy with the status quo. Either because they coveted the Qurayshi position over the holy city of Makkah, or because they were fearful of the growing influence of the religion of Islam and the exponential growth of the power and influence of the Muslims, they decided to mobilize a force against the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa And 2 of the main tribes that came together for this were the Banu Thaqif of Ta'if and the Hawazin, which were the largest Bedouin federation outside of Makkah, even larger than the Banu Ghatafan, who we spoke about a lot, particularly in the Battle of Khandaq. Ibn Ishaq, he records that when the Hawazin heard that God had given the Prophet possession of Makkah, a man by the name of Malik bin Auf al-Nasri, he collected people from various different tribes. He lists a number of tribes, but particularly the Thaqif and the Hawazin. And it's difficult to say exactly the numbers that came together. The only real estimate we have historically is from Waqidi, who says that they had in total around 20,000 soldiers. That is double the number of people that laid siege to the Meccans at the Battle of Khandaq. And it is double the size of the army of the Holy Prophet when he conquered Mecca. Just to give you a sense of scale. And Malik, he was a slightly younger leader, and he was very ambitious. And there were a number of different tactics he engaged in when he brought these people together. And Ibn Ishaq and Waqidi, they both mention that he decided to bring to the battlefield not only the soldiers, but the women, the children, the cattle, the camels, their property, so on and so forth. And this was to make sure that it wasn't possible for them to run away. That however difficult the battle was going, they would have no choice but to fight to the death, because otherwise they would lose everything that made life worth living. With simple logic, and it's similar, although on an even more profound measure, to what Abu Sufyan did at the Battle of Uhud. Now amongst them, from the tribe of Banu Jusham, was a man by the name of Durayd. And Durayd ibn as-Simma, he was an elderly man with a very sagacious history, one full of knowledge and experience within war. And when he came and he joined this confederation that was working to fight against the Holy Prophet and conquer Mecca, he heard the sounds of all of these different animals and of the people, and he said to Malik, "Why do I hear the groaning of camels, the braying of donkeys, the crying of children, and the bleating of sheep?" And Malik, he explains, "I brought them here out for the army so that they would make sure that we don't run away." And Durayd, he responded by saying, "O sheep tender," referring to him as a shepherd, "do you suppose anything will turn back a man who is running away from the battlefield? If all goes well, it will go well because of the sword and the lance, not because of what's on the battlefield. And if it goes badly, not only will you lose the battle, you will also lose your family and your property as well." He tried his best to convince Malik and the other people who had gathered there that it is not a good idea to take all of these people with us. It will not stop flight. And Malik, he got frustrated. And Ibn Ishaq records him as saying that, "O Durayd," he first of all, he called him an insulting name. And then he said, "Either, O people, I have brought you all together from all these different areas and different tribes. Either you listen to me, or I just put my sword on the floor and I will fall upon it." In other words, either you obey me and we do this together, or I'll just kill myself. A slightly immature, and there's an element of immaturity in his response. He doesn't take any of the wisdom from the elders. And Durayd, he lamented this, and he wished, if only I was younger and I could have led them. And this same Durayd, he would be killed in the battle as per Waqi. Now, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he had a number of different tribes who had allegiances with him, a growing number of Muslim tribes, and he had informants and scouts that would go around and gather information, because as we've seen from these nights, there was a lot of hostility against him. When you stand up for truth, when you stand up for what's right, and you try and reform unjust practices, it's only natural that people will fight back. So he receives from his scouts and his informants that there is this large group gathering, this gargantuan army. And so he prepares as well. He takes, Ibn Ishaq says, he takes the 10,000 people that conquered Mecca, and also he took 2,000 of the newly converted Muslims after that conquest. Now, the people who converted then at the conquest of Mecca were the people who had no choice. They had waited till the last possible moment, and they were desperate not to convert to Islam. But when the Holy Prophet conquered, he said, "Now you must. Either you pay for your crimes and you get judged as per what you did, or I will forgive everything. You just need to become Muslim." And it was a fair enough trade. Most of them, they accepted. But they were known as the Tulaqa. Bukhari, he uses this term in his Sahih as well, in his chapter titles. And it refers to those who were freed, because the Holy Prophet, he could have kept them as slaves. He could have kept them as war booty, essentially. But he chose not to. He freed them. And of course, naturally, their iman, it was not deeply set. Many of them didn't believe. In fact, most of them probably didn't believe at all. Although maybe the fact that they saw the victory of the Muslims, that instilled some faith into them. Now, most of these converts, they were at the back of the army. This is what Musa bin Uqba, he writes, that they basically observed what happened mostly in the battle. And they did various non-essential things. Waqidi, for example, he mentions that on this march, Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, the father of Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan, he would stay towards the back of the army, and he was scavenging. Anytime anyone dropped a shield or a spear or any valuables or anything of any worth, he would collect it and pick it up. And by the time they got to the battlefield, he had loaded his camel up with so many goods he picked up from the floor that it could barely walk. It was at the maximum capacity. And the standard had to go to one of the companions of the Holy Prophet. And who did Rasulullah give the standard to at the helm of this battle? None other than Imam Ali salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. This is well documented in the works of history. Ibn Ishaq, he mentions it, Ibn Sa'ad, his Tabaqat, so on and so forth. But in order to arm the Muslims, to get them ready for this conquest, because they didn't have enough weapons and enough armor for this volume of people. So the Holy Prophet, he went to Safwan ibn Umayyah, and he asked him, can you please lend me some of your armor, some of your weapons? And Safwan, he said, Ya Rasulullah, are you taking it from me? Like, are you seizing it? Do I have a choice in the matter? And the Holy Prophet said, of course. He says, I only wish to borrow them, and I will give them straight back to you. So then he said, okay, fine. In that case, I will give you 100 coats of mail and lots of arms, everything that I have at my disposal, and I will also help you with transport. And there's an element here that speaks about the ethics of the Holy Prophet in a position of power. Because again, just like we saw when he was marching towards the Battle of Uhud, he had the opportunity to quash rebellion. He wanted something, he had the army, he had the power, he had the influence, he had the currency. He could have taken what he wanted by force, and again, he could have justified it in modern terms for the sake of national security. But he didn't. He asked this person, and he asked him if he would allow them to take the wealth. And this person, though later he became a Muslim, at this time when the Holy Prophet took these things from him, he had actually not converted. He was still a polytheist. And this is one of those stories which is used about the permissibility of engaging in contracts with non-Muslims. So Malik, the leader of the opposition, he wanted to find out a little bit about the forces of the Holy Prophet. And so he sent his spies forward. But Ibn Ishaq mentions that they were not able to get any information. And when they came back to him in a pitiable condition. And some of their joints were dislocated. And Malik, he asked him, it's a very strange injury. Not the classic one that you would get on the battlefield, which usually consists of swords and shields. So Malik asks them, what happened to you? And they said that we saw these shining men in white garments on piebald horses, and immediately we suffered the way that we suffered. And it was clear from the description that this referred to some of the angels that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent them. But Malik, he was not dissuaded from fighting. And instead he withheld this information. He put them to the side so that it wouldn't spread amongst his people. But at the same time, the Holy Prophet, he too wanted information. So he sent his scout by the name of Abdullah ibn Hadarad al-Aslami to go and find out about the opposition. And Waqidi mentions how he walked into the camp of the opposition, he sat down near the leaders, and he started gathering information about them. And he heard that Malik said to his people that Muhammad has not really fought before this time. He used to fight against the inexperienced community that had no knowledge of war. And we've seen how many people, when they fight the Holy Prophet, they see how much he's won before, but they think, no, this time will be different, because we are different. And every time they said that, of course it was wrong. He says, when it is dawned, line up your cattle, your women, your children behind you. Line up yourselves. Then break the scabbards of your swords. All of these are measures to make sure that you can't possibly run away from the battlefield. Attack as one man, for victory belongs to whoever attacks first. And Ibn Ishaq and Tabari, they have the same story. They just don't mention the exact words that were shared. Now when the spy, when Abdullah, he goes back to the Holy Prophet, he tells him about what happened. He tells him about all the information he gathers. And the second Khalifa is summoned. And the Holy Prophet, he tells him about the information. But the second Khalifa, he was very upset at this. And he calls Abdullah a liar. He says, whatever information you have gathered, it is not true. And in response, Abdullah, he said, you may call me a liar, but for a long time did you not deny the truth? In other words, he's saying, yes, for some reason you don't believe me. We don't really know exactly what the motivation was. Maybe you don't believe me now, but you've not always been correct. It took you a long time to convert to the religion of Islam. For a long time you said the Holy Prophet was a false prophet. And this deeply offended the second Khalifa. He was hurt. And he turned to him, he said, Ya Rasulullah, look what he's saying about me. And the Holy Prophet said, indeed, he has spoken the truth. But then, you were in error, and then Allah guided you. Now, the Muslims, they had taken an oath never to flee from the Holy Prophet. Muslim records in his Sahih, in his kitab on the government, that we were 1,400 on the day of Hudaybiyah. And we swore fealty to him, to the Prophet. And the second Khalifa was holding the latter's hand when he was sitting under the tree. And the narrator added that we took an oath to the effect that we would not flee. بَايَعْنَاهُ عَلَى نَفِرٍ, that we gave allegiance, that we would never run away. But the narrator, he specifically comments that we did not take the bay'ah of maut. We said, Ya Rasulullah, will never run away from you, but we won't necessarily die for you. Which is an unusual thing to say. And we can contrast this with the bay'atul maut that we looked at on the day of Uhud, that Imam Ali and a select few companions that they conducted with the Holy Prophet. After the Muslims had run away and it looked like Islam was on the brink of destruction, they said that we will fight until we die, Ya Rasul. So there's clear tears in the allegiance and the love for the Holy Prophet amongst the companions of Rasul. Now Imam Ali, he has the banner. He's holding the banner of the army of the Muslims. But he is not at the very front of the army. He is with the Holy Prophet. So he's a few steps back, he's a few lines back. Who was at the front, according to Waqidi, was Khalid ibn al-Walid, one of the famous generals of the Muslims and someone who'd converted not too many years before. So he was at the vanguard. And the army was so big that the Muslims, they took pride in it. As Surah Tawbah, verse number 25, the verse I recited at the beginning, it said that the Muslims, they took pride in their numbers. They thought, we are so many, 12,000, we've never had an army like this. But those numbers did not avail. So the army was so big, sometimes it was difficult to get information from the front of the army to the back of the army. That they would often use messengers to run back and forth, or to use the animals to go backwards and forwards. So Khalid ibn al-Walid is at the front. Now, there is some fear of the Muslims that kicks in. Waqidi, he mentions through the testimony of Anas that when they reached Wadi Hunayn, one of the valleys of Tihama, one of the narrow gorges, something came to them from the Hawazin, and the Muslims had never seen such a multitude. The Hawazin, remember, they had driven their women, property, children, and their camels and sheep and cows and everything that they had, all behind them. But that was at a distance. So when the Muslims looked upon them, Anas, he said, that we saw it as a dark multitude. That we looked on the horizon, we saw the entire horizon was black. Because there were so many of them. And we thought, Anas said, we thought they were all men. We didn't realize they were bringing other people to the battlefield. So the Muslims, immediately they are intimidated by the numbers. And Malik, he had prepared for the coming of the Muslims. He was ready for this battle. Ibn Ishaq, he mentions the Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari, that he said, when we approached Wadi Hunayn, we came down through this wadi, this valley, so they're going in between these raised areas of ground, that was wide and sloping. And we were descending gradually in the morning twilight, and the enemy had got there before we did. And they had hidden themselves in the bypasses and the side tracks and the narrow places, and they were collected, fully prepared. And we were terrified when they came down, and the squadrons all attacked us as one man. So just to sort of summarize this narrative, you have the Muslims. Initially they're proud of having 12,000 men. They think that they will dwarf any army they go against. Then they advance forward. The vanguard under Khalid ibn al-Walid, it goes forward in between this valley area into a tight area. They see the volume of the opposition, but they can't tell that it's not all soldiers, so they think they're fighting an army much greater than their own. and then they are ambushed from all sides by the soldiers of the enemy under the direction of Malik, who had hidden them in every possible crevice and hiding place within the valley. So what happens next? What do the Muslims do? Bearing in mind that they have given this bay'ah, they will not flee. Ibn Ishaq, he mentions that the people broke and fled, none heeding the other. The apostle withdrew to the right and said, "Where are you going, men? Come to me. I am God's apostle. I am Muhammad, son of Abdullah." But they ignored him. And not for nothing did the camels bump into one another. And the men ran away, except some of the Muhajirun and Ansar, and the men of the family of the Prophet, they remained. And in particular, we'll remember the majority of the people who stayed, the overwhelming majority were from the family of the Holy Prophet. And it just gives us an indication, even towards the end of his life, of their excess loyalty towards him. And Allah says in Surah Tawbah verse 25, "Indeed, Allah has given you victory on many battlefields, even at the battle of Hunayn, where you took pride in your great numbers, but they proved no advantage to you. The earth, despite its vastness, seemed to close in on you, and you turned back in retreat." Just like at the Battle of Uhud, very similar descriptions. They turn and they flee whilst the Holy Prophet is calling them back. And he is reminding them who he is, that they don't run. But the key difference between the Battle of Hunayn and the Battle of Uhud is that there was no verse revealed after this that spoke openly about the forgiveness of those who fled. And Allah warns about fleeing within battle. Surah Anfal verse number 16, "Whoever turns his back to them on that day, unless withdrawing to fight again or removing to join another troop." In other words, if he's fleeing properly from the battlefield, not a tactical retreat, then he will have the wrath of Allah, and his abode is hellfire. So Allah is very strict in the Quran about those who run. Now, when the Muslims start to run, and it looks like the army of the Holy Prophet is collapsing, there are many people who are taking joy out of it. And not all of them are on the opposite side. Because remember, 2,000 of the soldiers of the Holy Prophet, they are from the Turaqa, the people who have just converted from Makkah, who are in their hearts, they're not yet Muslim, many of them. So Ibn Ishaq, he mentions that when the men fled, the rude fellows from Makkah who were with the apostles saw the flight, and they spoke in such a way to betray their enmity. Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, he said that their flight will not stop until they reach the sea. In other words, these Muslims are now running in such a fashion, they will run all the way to the coast and into the ocean. And it was some hint towards the fact that this will be the end of Islam. And another man by the name of Jabala, he said, "The spell of Muhammad is broken. The sorcery of Muhammad is no more." Now, Safwan ibn Umayyah, who, remember, he was that polytheist who had lent the arms to the Holy Prophet, he told him in a very rude way, he told him to be quiet. "God smash your mouth. I would rather be ruled by a man of Quraysh than a man from Hawazin." And this was just another testimony to the witnessing of the justice of the Holy Prophet. This man doesn't believe that the Rasulullah is a messenger, but he's seen his justice. He knows how kind and compassionate he is. And if he has to choose to be ruled by anyone, he would choose the Holy Prophet. But it also tells us a little bit about their tribal thinking as well. So that leads us now to the question, who ran away and who remained with the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now, we get various lists from the early sources, and I'll comment on the lists in a few moments. Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Sa'ad, they mention those who remained. They included Imam Ali alayhi salam, Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith. So this is a different Abu Sufyan to Muawiyah's father. His son, Fadl ibn Abbas, Rabi'a ibn al-Harith, Usama ibn Zayd, that teenager who the Holy Prophet would later send just before his death on an expedition. Ayman ibn Ayman, who that day he was martyred, although Ayman, he's not on Ibn Sa'ad's list. And he also mentions both of these sources. They mention the first Khalifa and the second Khalifa. Waqidi, he mentions the full list, and he also adds Abu Dujana and Al-Harith. But there are other traditions that give us slightly different details. For example, in Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, he says that only 4 people remained. Imam Ali, Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith, and Ibn Mas'ud. And later in another tradition he says Zayd. And he says in Ibn Abi Shayba's Musannaf that no one advanced towards the Prophet except that he was killed, whilst the polytheists lay slain around him as if they had been counted in a garland, or as if they were beads on a wreath. So again, picture this. The Holy Prophet is fighting against an army of up to 20,000. Most of his army has run away, and we have lists of about 10 people, a maximum of 10 people who have remained. And they fight so ferociously that anybody who comes towards the Holy Prophet or tries to attack them, they are cut down immediately such that they look like beads on a string. And the Holy Prophet himself, he fought. Ibn Abi Shayba, he mentions in a Sahih Hadith that the Holy Prophet, he dismounted, he sought victory. And he called the people, he said, I am your Prophet, I am the son of Abdul Muttalib, appealing to their Arab pride as well. So it's interesting, he has both the Islamic call, and if for those who are not heeding the Islamic call, to the Arabian tribal calls as well. Anything that would work. He said, Oh, Allah sent down your victory, and when the battle became fierce, we would seek protection from the Prophet, for he is the brave one who stands firm besides him. And again, it's a similar description for the Battle of Uhud. The Holy Prophet as well is fighting so ferociously that whenever anybody needs a break or they need some cover, they would go nearer the Holy Prophet because they knew they would be safe there. The Holy Prophet, he takes some dust or some pebbles and he throws them towards the opposition. Ibn Abi Shayba, he says, the Prophet dismounted from his horse, took a handful of dust and threw it at the faces of the enemy, asking that they may be disfigured. Ibn Sa'ad, he says pebbles, and this had an effect on the army. Multiple members of the army afterwards, they said, for example, Ibn Abi Shayba, he mentions the name of Ya'la, and also we read from Waqidi that Malik ibn Aus, multiple members of the opposition, they reported afterwards that throughout the whole battle, it was like we had dust or pebbles in our face. There was this constant irritation, this difficulty within our eyes and our mouths. And also Ibn Abi Shayba mentions they heard a clanging of the sound between the heaven and earth as if people were hitting copper basins. And Ibn Abi Shayba, he also mentions the clanging. Waqidi, he says, one of the witnesses, Suwaid, he said that he would take a pebble and he would throw it inside a copper basin. And he said, you know that sound that you just experienced? That feeling? We had it beating inside our chests for the entire battle. That there was just this constant visceral discomfort from our eyes, our ears, and within our bellies, inside us as well. And there was much bravery from those who stayed behind with the Holy Prophet. Ibn Ishaq, he mentions that in the initial chaos, as the Muslims are running, that Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith, he stood firm, he held on to the saddle of the Holy Prophet to try and stay as close to him as possible. And when the Holy Prophet turned around, he said, who has grabbed my saddle? He said, I am the son of your mother, referring to his grandmother because they were cousins. So remember, again, he's from the family of the Holy Prophet. Another one who stayed, as per Ibn Ishaq and also Waqidi, was a lady by the name of Sulaym. And she was the wife of Abu Talha. And she said, O Prophet, O Allah, kill those who run away from you, just as you kill those who fight you, because they are worthy of death. A very powerful line. Everyone who is running now, Ya Rasulullah, they should be as much of an enemy to you as the very people who are fighting against you. And she recognizes the impact of people running away on the battlefield, leaving the Prophet to die. And the Holy Prophet, rather than saying, no, they're not worthy of being killed, instead he says, rather, God will save me the need, O Sulaym. So he doesn't challenge the premise of her statement, but he says, don't worry, it won't come to that. And she had a knife with her, and she said, if anyone comes near me from the opposition, I will strike them down. Another of the ladies, another name which may be familiar, was Ummara, the same lady who stayed at the Battle of Uhud. Waqidi, he mentions a tradition whereby she had her knife and she would strike at the tendons of the camels that were charging at the Holy Prophet. When they would fall down, the soldiers would fall down, she would jump on them and she would attack them with her knife. And she killed at least one person who was trying to attack the Holy Prophet. So these are some examples of individual bravery protecting the Holy Prophet during this early period. And the Holy Prophet, he does his famous dua that tells us about the gravity of the battle. In Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shaybah, in a very reliable narration, he says, one of the supplications of the Prophet on the day of Hunayn was, O Lord, if you will, after this day you will not be worshipped. The same dua at the Battle of Badr. The same dua at multiple battles, which shows us the gravity. That in this situation, if it continues this way, there's a possibility that I will be killed and Islam will be finished. It would be a domino effect. This is not the right time for him to die. So it gives us an impact. We have a verse of the Quran which is revealed about it, and we also have this dua from the Holy Prophet that tells us about how important this battle is. So who specifically fled? Let's look at the name like we did when we were speaking about the Battle of Uhud. Let's look in particular at the names of the first three Khulafa. It's important for theological purposes, and we'll look at it because there's a clear divergence between the sources from the Shia and the sources from our brothers in the school of Ahl Sunnah. Regarding the Shia sources, it's generally accepted. For example, Shaykh al-Mufid, he writes in his Kitab al-Irshad, a list of all the people who remained, which were 10, but amongst them he does not write the name of any of the first three Khulafa. And he says that anyone who was not on this list, they ran away from the Holy Prophet. So the Shia opinion is quite straightforward. As for looking at the earliest Sunni sources, it varies depending on the companion. For the first Khalifa, there is general acceptance among all of the Sunni sources that the first Khalifa remained. You've seen his name was on every list that has come so for almost every list apart from Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah, and it's corroborated by another story with his witnessing another man called Abu Qatada. So that's the first Khalifa. The second Khalifa is where things get a little bit more interesting, because we've seen his name was also mentioned on a number of these lists about those who remained. But we also have other sources which count him amongst those who ran away, at least initially. Bukhari, in his Kitab al-Maghazi, so as authentic as it gets, there's a tradition, it's a long tradition, but from the center of it, the Muslims, except for the Holy Prophet and some of his companions, they started fleeing. This is the narrator of the hadith. He's saying, the companions of the Prophet, most of them, they fled, and I fled with them. So the Arabic is, وَانْهَزَمَ الْمُسْلِمُونَ وَانْهَزَمْتُ. So I fled. We were defeated, we were running. We were taking flight, and suddenly I met the second Khalifa amongst the people. And I asked him, what is wrong with the people? And he said, this is the will of Allah. So this man is running away from the Holy Prophet, and whilst he's running away from the Prophet, he encounters the second Khalifa. So it's quite clear from this that at least initially, the second Khalifa was amongst those who fled. And there's a similar tradition by Waqidi, although this time from the perspective of another lady, al-Haritha al-Ansariya. She said that she grabbed the reins of her husband's camel, and she was trying to stop her husband from running away and abandoning the Holy Prophet. And whilst the Muslims were in flight, she came across the second Khalifa, and she asked him, Oh Umar ibn al-Khattab, what is this? And he replied that this is the command of God. And she said, O Messenger of God, whoever passes by me, I will kill him. I've never seen a day where people abandon us like this. So in this narration from Waqidi, it's not as clear that he's definitely amongst those who are fleeing, but it fits the same narrative that we find within Bukhari. So how do we reconcile the other sources and this one from Bukhari? What is quite likely then is that in the initial chaos, there was a large flight of every single one of the Muslims except a select few. And the second Khalifa was amongst those who initially ran away, but then he must have been, according to the early Sunni sources, he must have been one of the earliest to come back to the Holy Prophet. As for the third Khalifa, there's not much in the way of evidence. There's not much documentation about him. The books of Maghazi, the books of history, they're largely silent. It is generally assumed that he was there, and generally assumed that he was amongst those who ran away, because his name didn't feature on any of those lists. Although there's one narration within Waqidi's Maghazi, Kitab al-Maghazi, that mentions that he was involved in some of the fighting. So he may, at a stretch, based on this one isolated narration, he may have been amongst those who came back, but again, it's stretching it a little bit. And this takes us back to the concept of Imam Ali. Because remember, Imam Ali, as we looked at in our discussion in the Battle of Khaybar, is karrar ghairi farrar. He strikes repeatedly, but he does not run away. And many of the people around the Holy Prophet, they would abandon him. At multiple key moments during his lifetime, they would flee, particularly when things got difficult. We've seen the examples, for example, at the Battle of Uhud, and now we see again at the Battle of Hunayn. The overwhelming majority of the companions of the Holy Prophet, of his Sahaba, they run away and they leave him in the most difficult of circumstances. And also, if we rewind, even in times of difficulty before he migrated, when they were boycotted and they had the severe sanctions against them in the valley of Abu Talib, most of the Muslims, even though they had converted, some had migrated to Abyssinia, including the third Khalifa, but many had converted at that time and they did not help the Holy Prophet at one of the most difficult times in his life. And that's why the Holy Prophet, he gave, as we discussed in the discussion on Khaybar, he gave extra war booty to the Banu Hashim and the Banu al-Muttalib, because those were the only ones who didn't abandon him. And there was a set of non-Muslims who also helped. So they run away from the Holy Prophet en masse, in times of war, in times of difficulty, but also in times of ease. It is not alien. For example, we have the very famous story, which is recorded, it's accepted by all Muslims, it's mentioned in Sahih Bukhari and mentioned in many ahadith in Sahih Muslim, that the Holy Prophet, he is reciting, this is in Kitab al-Jumu'ah of both works, that the Holy Prophet is reciting his Salatul Jumu'ah, he's giving his sermon, he's standing up, and a trade caravan arrives from Syria. And the overwhelming majority of Muslims, of the thousands that were there, Bukhari and Muslim, they mention only 12 remained sitting with the Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet is giving a sermon. And in the middle of the sermon of Salatul Jumu'ah, which according to all schools is wajib in the presence of the Holy Prophet, they abandon the Jumu'ah in the middle of it, and they go in order to engage in trade, apart from 12. And they both mention, Bukhari and Muslim and other sources, that this was the occasion of revelation for the last verse of Suratul Jumu'ah. So the nearness to the Holy Prophet is determined by action, not by adjectives. That's a key point. Whenever we praise Imam Ali, we have a corresponding action that allows it to happen. So now we will return back to the battle. And just to summarize so far, there are 12,000 Muslims against 20,000 of the opposition. They've entered the valley, they're intimidated by the number of the opposition, they are ambushed by them. The vanguard that went at the front, in particular under Khalid ibn al-Walid and others, they were ambushed, terror was struck into their hearts, and they turned and ran. And almost all of the Muslims abandoned the Holy Prophet whilst he was calling them back. Only about 10 or so remained, mostly from his own family. And then these who remained, they fought like lions in order to protect the Holy Prophet, such that they are littering the ground with the bodies of the enemies. And that's where we'll pick up our story. So Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, he says, this is recorded by Ibn Ishaq, that I was with the apostle, and I was holding the ring of the bridle, which was put between the jaws of his white mule. And I was a big man with a powerful voice. And the apostle, he was calling them back, where are you going, men? And nobody listened to him, no one paid any heed. And so he asked me, O Abbas, call to them. And then I called to them, O Ansar, O comrades of the acacia tree. And then some of the companions, they answered. But the flight of the Muslims was so ferocious, it was so indomitable, that the Muslims who wanted to come back, they struggled. So Ibn Ishaq, he says that a man would try and turn his beast, and he could not do so, because the flow of the Muslims was like a river in the wrong direction, that if one of them decided, actually I'm not going to run away, they couldn't even turn their animal around. And so they would take their armor, they would take their weapon, and they would jump off of their beast. And they would go back to the Holy Prophet on foot. Because still, even with Abbas calling, the majority of them, they don't turn around. And finally, Ibn Ishaq mentions, 100 or so were gathered by him. And they went forward and they fought with the Holy Prophet. And Waqidi, he corroborates from a separate source that about 100 companions they had gathered. And that Waqidi, he says that he asks one of his companions, Al-Haritha, that tell me, how many do you see that are holding firm? And Haritha, he looks around, he looks left, he looks right, he says, oh Prophet, I think maybe 100 have come back. And then the Holy Prophet, he made a statement that became a part of the Arab lexicon. He said, Al-an hamiyal watis. Now the furnace is burning. In other words, now the real fight begins. So, during this confusion and during this difficulty, a lot of the opposition were trying to use it as that opportunity to kill the Holy Prophet. And there's one particularly famous example. Ibn Ishaq mentions a man by the name of Shayba ibn Uthman. He comes forward and he says, today I will get my revenge on Muhammad, because he was from the Bani Abd Dar. Remember those standard bearers that were killed at Uhud by Imam Ali and others. And so he ran towards the Holy Prophet, ready to try and kill him. But Ibn Ishaq, he mentions there was some sort of barrier. I couldn't get to it. And I knew it was from Allah. But Ibn Sa'ad and Waqidi, they mention in more detail that as Shayba went forward, a flame, a fire like lightning struck down. Either it hit him as per Ibn Sa'ad, or it hit the floor in front of him as per Waqidi, and immediately he recognized that this is from God. That God does not will me to go to this man. He tries to run away. The Holy Prophet, he calls him back. He puts his hand on his chest, and then Shayba, he says, I turned around and I fought for the Holy Prophet rather than against him. And it's interesting because obviously this is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a miracle protecting the Prophet. And some Muslims, they needed miracles in order to convert, because they needed that extra layer of convincing. And a miracle, it's a form of evidence. It fits into part of rational argument. But there are others who don't need that. They don't need miracles. They don't need momentum. They don't need success of the Muslims. They don't need prospects of a better future. They simply need the Holy Prophet to call them, and they will answer. And the earliest to answer the call of the Holy Prophet and to promise to support him at Da'watul Ashira was none other than Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. And that leads us on to talk about the exploits of Ali ibn Abi Talib. For again, the day of Hunayn was the day of Ali ibn Abi Talib. There was so much difficulty, so much stress of the Muslims. Only this handful had remained. And initially they were 10, and then at the most it went up to 100. And all this time Imam Ali is fighting. But remember, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he is not just a warrior on the battlefield. Remember, Rasulullah said, Ana Madinatul Ilm wa Aliyun Babuha. He is a master of all knowledge, including tactics. And so when he's on the battlefield, he does the only thing, there's only one thing that could save the Muslims on this day, that could allow 100 men to defeat 20,000. And that was to kill their standard bearer. Their standard bearer, according to Kitab al-Irshad, his name was Abu Jarwal. We don't have his name from Sunni sources. But he goes forward. And this man, he is a ferocious warrior, man from Hawazin. He rides a red camel, according to Ibn Ishaq, and he has a black banner. And at the end of a long spear, he leads the Hawazin forward. And Ibn Ishaq, he gives details of the way of how he's vanquishing Muslims on the battlefield, how he's defeating them left and right. And then Ibn Ishaq, he says, with what it happens to be a Hasan chain, that while this was happening, Ali ibn Abi Talib and one of the men of Ansar, they went towards him. Now, Ibn Ishaq doesn't name this man. Waqidi, he says that it was Abu Dujan, also one of the men who stayed behind at Uhud. And Imam Ali, he went with laser precision right towards where the standard of the enemy was, and immediately he went forward and he cut both of the hamstrings of the camel, and it collapsed onto its haunches. And then the other man who was with him, the Ansari man, he went to the wounded soldier who was on the floor and he finished him. But the words are very important. So the word in the narration is Arqubay al-Jam, both hamstrings. So Imam Ali, when he takes his sword, he's not just cutting the tendons, he cuts clean through the legs of the camel with one strike of his tulfiqah. Number one. Number two, the word which was used about cutting, atanna, it refers to a clean cut, which sometimes makes a ringing sound, a cleaving blow. And the camel, it collapsed totally and utterly. In Ja'far, So just from this brief narration in Ibn Ishaq, we can see the ferocity and the strength of Ali ibn Abi Talib on the battlefield. And he's coordinating and he's commanding his men. He only has a few, but he works in tandem with them in order to keep Islam alive at its most dangerous moment since the Battle of Khandaq. And when the standard of the opposition falls, the entire army of both the enemy and the army of the Holy Prophet, they see the standard of the opposition against all momentum of battle, it has fallen. But the battle is still not over. And the 100 Muslims along the Holy Prophet, they fight and they push back against the opposition until the rest of the Muslim army, they realize what has happened. They saw the banner fall. They decided, right, we will go back. So now the majority of the army turns around and comes. But Ibn Ishaq, he says that when they came back, they found only prisoners in handcuffs around the Holy Prophet. That the 100 under the command of Imam Ali alongside the Holy Prophet, they fought so ferociously on that battlefield that they had put the enemy to flight. Alongside the subtle aid from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the angels and the feelings that they had and the pebbles of the Prophet, the opposition, they had run. So the Muslims, they came back thinking, now we will fight a great battle. And they realized that the Holy Prophet was right. Indeed, the furnace had been lit and the enemy had been vanquished. And you can only imagine what kind of ferocity, what kind of battle took place on that day. Shaykh al-Mufid, he mentions that Imam Ali, he killed 40 men on that battlefield. And a lot more would have been wounded. But we don't have many other records that mention numbers, certainly within the early sources from the school of Ahl Sunnah. But simply using common sense and assessing the situation, you can understand how well they must have fought on that day. There are some involvement of the angels. Ibn Ishaq, he mentions that Jubair bin Mut'im, he says that he saw a black cloud carpet of some substance that descended from the clouds, and when it came across the people, it was like ants that were spreading across the opposition, and they knew that that was a force of angels that Allah had sent. Now the enemy, they fled, and whilst they fled, there were heavy casualties. Ibn Ishaq, he mentions that over 70 of the Banu Malik were killed, and of the Hawazin and the Thaqif, so on and so forth. And this is only of a couple of the tribes. The numbers that were killed on that day were much more than that. So the opposition, they have been defeated and they run. But the Holy Prophet, he doesn't stop. Just like at the Battle of Uhud, the other battle where the Muslims ran, he instead pursued the opposition. Because remember, they're a group of up to 20,000. Even if they've been defeated, even if they've lost a few hundred men on this day, they can simply regroup and they'll be ready to attack the Muslims again. So the Holy Prophet, he pursues them. Many of them disperse, particularly the Hawazin. They go in different directions. And the others, the tribe of Thaqif, they go back to At-Ta'if, which is where they had a fortress there. So the Holy Prophet, he leaves the ones that go disparately into the desert. He goes towards Ta'if. But before he does that, it's important to note that there was a large volume of war booty. One of the largest in the history of Islam. Perhaps the largest in the individual moment. The only competition was Khaybar. Because remember, they brought all of their cows and sheep and camels and wealth and women and children. So all of these were captured by the Holy Prophet. But rather than distributing them, first he took them, he put them in a valley in a place called Ji'arana, and then he went towards Ta'if. Now they laid siege to Ta'if temporarily. The siege maybe lasted a couple of weeks or so, the numbers they vary. But the Muslims, they were not victorious in this siege. They did not take down the fortress, they didn't take down the walls. But this is part of the foresight of the Holy Prophet. He knew they didn't need to. Because within 11 months, that same tribe, within Ta'if, they would convert and become Muslim. The Holy Prophet actually wanted to end the siege earlier, but the companions were quite insistent, no, we'll try and we'll continue to push. So now the Holy Prophet has this great war booty, and Waqidi, he says that it was over 6,000 captives, 24,000 camels, 40,000 sheep, and 4,000 ounces of silver. The amount of wealth that was taken in booty was absolutely colossal. Now the Holy Prophet, he distributed some of it according to the general laws of war. For example, if a soldier killed an enemy warrior, he had right to the weapons and the armor. But he then gave a large quantity of that money to many of the new converts from Mecca. People like Abu Sufyan, people like Muawiyah ibn Abu Sufyan. And the reason for that, for giving a disproportionate amount to the tulaqa, is because they were not totally sold on Islam. They had converted in large numbers, but they may well at any moment, when they saw the opportunity, betray the Holy Prophet and try and go back to their previous ways. So by giving this wealth there, it was a very astute decision, because it would try and bring them closer to Islam. And this is a concept which is clear within the Quran, Surah Tawbah, verse number 60, that he says that you can give zakah to those whose hearts are inclined towards Islam. And many of the companions of the Prophet, they are very upset at this distribution. And most interestingly of all, there was a man who's recorded both by Bukhari and Muslim, that at the time of distribution, a man by the name of Dhul Khuwaysira, he came from the Banu Tamim, and he said, O Messenger of God, be just, be fair. And the Holy Prophet, he became angry. And he said, woe unto you! Who will be fair? Who will be just if I am not? You have failed and you are lost if I am not just. And the man, he turned away. But then the Holy Prophet, he said, from the root of this man, there will emerge a people who will recite the Quran fluently, but it will not pass at their throats. They will leave the religion as an arrow leaves its prey. Khalid ibn al-Walid, he said, should I kill him? And the Holy Prophet, he said, no. We don't attack people or punish people based on intention or based on what they will do, only until they've done it. And this was a reference, this is the earliest reference that we have to the burgeoning group that would become known as the Khawarij. Abdul Rahman ibn Muljim, who killed Imam Ali, he was of this group, of the Kharijites, who rejected all leadership within Islam, even the leadership of the Holy Prophet. And another group that were slightly upset were the Ansar, because they felt they had supported the Holy Prophet so much, and now he didn't give them much of this war booty. And in Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah, he then goes over to them in order to give a speech to placate them. And he gives one of the most beautiful speeches that he gives. And from a group of Ansar who were upset, that felt their Prophet had betrayed them, at the end they are in tears, and they said, Allah and His Messenger know best. He stood before them and he said, there are people of Ansar, were you not misguided? Did I not guide you? Were you not enriched through Allah and united through Him? By Allah, O Ansar, if I had to go through a difficult path with you or an easy path with anyone else, I would go through the difficult mountain paths. You are to me like my inner garment. All other people are like my outer garment. Indeed, there will be a time of preferential treatment against you after I go. Very, very interesting prescient comment. But then he says the most powerful point of all. He says that is it not sufficient to you that yes, the people of Makkah, they go back to their city with their camels and their sheep and their wealth. But when you go back to Medina, you have the greatest gift of all. For I will come with you. It was a very powerful moment of this speech, because when they conquered Makkah, the people of Medina, they were worried. They thought, well, now that the Holy Prophet has got his hometown back, he's going to abandon us. He's going to leave us. But here the Holy Prophet promised them, no, you are loyal to me in my time of difficulty. I will be loyal to you now in times of strength. It was a very eloquent speech that he gave, one of the most famous speeches of his lifetime. So Ibn Ishaq, Tabari and Waqidi, they mentioned that the war booty was distributed. Some of the Hawazin, they then came back and they said that they would convert to Islam, they wanted their stuff back. But the Holy Prophet said, look, it's been weeks. We literally had an entire siege of another place. You didn't come back before then. So the Holy Prophet, he said, okay, look, you can choose. Either you have your wealth back or you have your families back. And they said, well, okay, we'll go for our families, obviously. So the Holy Prophet, he asked Muslims, please, can you give anyone who has them, please give them back. Remember, there was no prison system at the time. The only way to look after large members of the population was to take them into servitude. So the Holy Prophet says, give them back. I give all of them back from myself and from the Banu Hashim, the Banu Muttalib, the Ansar and Muhajirun. Most of them said, yes, we give everybody back. This is your will, Ya Rasulullah. A few people refused, particularly of the new converts. So the Holy Prophet, he paid them from his own wealth in order to allow the Bani Hawazin to get all of their family members back. Every single one of them was returned. And again, he's just fought a battle against these people. And he waited for weeks, but they did not come. This is another highlighting of the ethics of the Holy Prophet on the battlefield. He waited to give it back, and when they came, he still did his best to honor.